our sermon this morning or this evening as we continue, as I said last week, looking at Jesus, fixing our eyes on Jesus. And we are turning our attention to a specific point in our lives, or maybe a series of points in our life. Last week we looked at sin, and tonight we're looking at the storm, fixing our eyes on Jesus in those moments when we find ourselves in the middle of the storm. There are, in Jesus's ministry recorded for us, there's two major storms, two major miraculous storms that Jesus was a part of. The first one is when he is asleep on the boat. And his disciples wake him up, Jesus, Jesus, don't you care that we're all about to die? Then he wakes up and he calms the storm. The next one takes place relatively soon after that in the situation as Jesus tells his disciples to leave and go to the other side. And all of a sudden, the storm comes from the mountains and gathers into the sea. And as they're crossing, the storm catches them as they are about 600 foot or so from the shoreline. And they're thrashed about by and thinking again that they're about to drown. And Jesus comes intending to pass by them, walking on the water in the middle of the storm. And I was debating as I was prepared, I was debating, which one of these two do we want to turn our attention to? And I couldn't get past where Jesus was. And we'll explain that in just a moment. But before we dive into that, I want to turn your attention to the book of Psalms in 57. The 57th Psalm, aside from being absolutely beautiful and true to life, it's certainly pertinent when we think about ourselves in the middle of the storm. Look at this in verse 1. This is how it starts. Be merciful. This is of David. Be merciful to me, O God. Be merciful to me. For in you my soul takes refuge. In the shadow of your wings I will take refuge, till the storms of destruction pass by. Have mercy on me. Be merciful twice. Be merciful to me. My soul twice. My soul finds refuge in you twice. I'm going to be here until the storm passes by. So we find Jesus turning back our attention to the book of Matthew is where we're going to be, in Matthew's account of this particular situation. Matthew chapter 13, we love Matthew chapter 13 because here is perhaps one of the greatest series of lessons that Jesus gives sequentially. And he gives some of our favorite parables here found in Matthew chapter 13. He tells about the parable of the sower. He tells about the parable of the seed, the mustard seed, tells about the tares. He tells us about some of the greatest. Matthew chapter 13 we love. After the parable event, Jesus goes to Nazareth. And here we find Jesus in the middle of his own storms. This is the first storm that Jesus is in. This is, if you'll go back a little bit, I think this is a storm of rejection. Because Jesus, he's holding people, the crowds. They are eating out of the palm of his hand, hanging on every word. And centuries later, millennia, we are still hanging on every word that Jesus says here in Matthew chapter 13. Then he returns back to Nazareth. And this is what it says there. When he finished these parables, he went away from there, and coming to his hometown, he taught them in their synagogues. Matthew 13, verse 54. So that they were astonished. Again, hanging on his every word. They were astonished and said, "Where did this man get this wisdom and these mighty works? Is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary? Are not his brothers James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? Are not all his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all these things?" They're astonished. Verse 54. Verse 57 says they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own hometown and in his own household." And he did not do many mighty works there because of their unbelief. In between storms, Jesus finds himself in one of, and you might find yourself right here with Jesus right tonight in the middle of rejection. You go to a place and you anticipate a warm welcome home, a reception, and maybe even a grandiose pat on the back. Job well done. We hear about all the great things you're doing, and instead you get back home. Get out of here. Who are you? Why are you talking that way? Do you really expect us to believe you? Who do you think you are talking to us that way? Jesus, at this moment, finds himself in the middle of a storm, the storm of rejection, that feeling when people, undoubtedly, he's known these people most of his life. He's seen them. Maybe he's worked beside them. Maybe he's sold them some of his own work that he's done with his hands. And here he has the most important thing to share with them. And it's not a wheel for a wagon or a utensil to use in the kitchen. It's the good news about salvation. And they say, get out of here. When you are in that storm of rejection, with your expectation up here and your earth is just shattered, what do? Jesus gives us a good example of what we should do. Look at Mark's account in Mark chapter 6. Look at what Mark records for us. Mark 6, 5 and 6. This is what it says that Jesus did. When he came to Nazareth, the people that he loved, and they said, "Get out of here. Who are you?" And he could do no mighty work there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. And he went out among the villages teaching. What did he do? He spoke the truth. That's the first thing he did. He taught. He taught the truth. He told them the truth. And I'm going to go so far as to say that he told them the truth in love. Go ahead, one. But they still didn't believe him. Here's the thing about God. And we all need to get this through our thick skulls. God doesn't expect us to do spectacular things. God doesn't even expect us to do things that are beyond capability. God expects us to do the very simple and our very best, right? He taught. He taught the truth. He didn't change the whole village. He didn't change everybody in Nazareth. All he did was simply tell them the truth. And I would say, again, he told them the truth in love. Even Jesus came to his hometown, and even Jesus couldn't compel everybody about the truth. But that didn't stop him from speaking the truth. The next thing that we see that he did, especially recorded for us in Mark chapter 6, verse 6, is that he did what he could. He did do something. He did what he was capable of doing. He worked. He worked the works of God for the intention that God had assigned it to be done. He didn't simply walk into the synagogue. They say, "Who are you? Get out of here." He get mad and stomp off and leave everybody just because of a few people that rejected him. No, those who did receive him, he helped. He did work. He did what he was capable of doing. He did teach the truth. Again, I would categorize teaching the truth in love. I think we could go that far. And the next thing that he did is perhaps the hardest thing that he did. He left. When you're in the storm, especially when you're in the storm of rejection, I would propose that this is how we handle it. When there are those around you that have blown you off, that don't care about anything that you have to say or anything that you do, first, tell them the truth. Lovingly tell them the truth. Second, do what you can do for those that would have you do it. And second or third, walk away. There are going to be, as we turn back to Matthew chapter 13, there are going to be seeds that fall on the hard ground, and Satan's going to snatch them up. And there's going to be seeds that fall on the thorny ground, and the cares of the world are going to choke them out. There's going to be seeds that fall on that rocky ground, and they're going to shoot up and spring up and give you so much excitement. And then the sun's going to scorch them. Sow the seed and leave the rest up to God. When you are in that storm of rejection and you feel like you've just been punched in the gut, Jesus has been there. And I think here at Nazareth, I think he was there in that storm of rejection. I propose, do what you can and leave the rest up to God. That's exactly what Jesus did. And we move on from that storm, that phase in Jesus' life, and it catches him again. Another storm, another thing, another series of events in life that just blows us away. This is the storm of death. Because in this storm, all of us find ourselves. At one point in life or another, we're all going to be there. We're staring down at that person that we love and we care deeply about. That's the storm of death. So put yourself in Jesus' shoes just for a couple of seconds and read with me what has just happened. He goes to his own hometown. He goes to Nazareth, people that he loves and cares about, and they absolutely reject him. They get out of here. We don't believe you. Who are you? You can't talk to us that way. So he leaves there, and then he gets the news about John. Verse 1 of chapter 14. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard about the fame of Jesus, and he said to his servants, "This is John the Baptist. He has been raised from the dead. That is why these miraculous powers are at work in him." For, this is a parenthetical statement, this is what has happened. For Herod had seized John and bound him and put him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because John had been saying to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." And though he wanted to put him to death, he feared the people because they held him to be a prophet. But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before the company and pleased Herod, so that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she might ask. Prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me the head of John the Baptist here on a platter." And the king was sorry. But because of his oaths and his guests, he commanded it be given. He sent and had John beheaded in prison, and his head was brought on a platter and given to the girl. She brought it to her mother. And his disciples came and took the body and buried it, and they went and told Jesus. You've just come to your family and your friends' family, friends. And they reject you. So you continue on with your ministry, and you get the news of the one man on this earth that knew what Jesus was all about has been executed. Now Jesus is alone. More alone, I promise you, more alone in this life than he has ever been before. Jesus' storm is surrounding him. You find yourself in that storm of death, looking down at that casket, at that beloved friend or loved one, or whoever it is, and you see them lying there. Jesus has been there. What do you do when you find yourself in the storm of death? I think it's safe to say that you grieve. You grieve, and you grieve with the best of them. You experience the sorrow because death brings sorrow. Jesus felt sorrowful in this moment, in death. Because death, we talked about it a few weeks ago, but death is simply, it's a reminder of sin. So when you think about the sin of Herodias, Philip, when you think about the sin of Philip or Philip and Herod and Salome, when you think about the sin and the sinful situation, you think about this is all just a reminder of how sinful the world is. Jesus was sorrowful when he heard about the death of John. I don't know if there's even a writer in Hollywood who could think of a more grotesque manner, a more repulsive, wretched, and awful woman. I don't want him killed. I want to see his head. You talk about somebody that's sleazy. Then the disciples of John come, and undoubtedly, they bury they take his body. Undoubtedly, they tell Jesus about it. Jesus is reminded of sin when he encounters death. But I mean, he's also reminded that this is the opposite of who I am. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. And here is someone taking the very life of somebody that I absolutely adore and cherish in John. Undoubtedly, Jesus' sorrow is elevated to another degree. And especially when we think about it again, that this is something, death is something that Satan loves to use. Think about how Satan has used the death of John the Baptist right here in this short story. This story about the death of John the Baptist is dripping. It reeks of sin. It's a reminder of Satan's tools that he uses. But I believe Jesus also feels sorrow for other people, because here are the disciples of John the Baptist coming to him, and in the storm we experience sorrow. When we lose people, there's no doubt sorrow accompanies the storm of death. But there's also, as strange as it is, there's also joy. You know, John's been in prison, and he's essentially been Herod's little puppet. Hey, bring John to me. I want to hear him again. But now, John doesn't have to experience any of that anymore. So there is, in death, there's this hint of joy, because here's this guy that has come, and he has done exactly what he was supposed to do, right? Prepare the way for Jesus. The way has been thoroughly prepared. John has accomplished his mission. So anybody who dies having accomplished their mission, especially when we're talking in a spiritual context, that person deserves a rejoicing at their burial. There's also joy in the fact that John didn't back down. I love that about John. That good old boy with locusts in between his teeth stood before the king. You're an adultery. You're an adulteress. You don't need to have your brother's wife. This is wrong, and you know it's wrong. Shaming the one that holds his life in his hand. That's bold. But when someone has that type of audacity and boldness for the truth, and they experience death because of the truth, they should be commended. There is certainly an element of sorrow, but there's also the subtlety of joy. This proverb that has come to my mind so often, I want to share it with you, and I hope one day that it could be said of me and all of us, is Proverbs 14 and verse 32. The wicked is overthrown through his evil doing. This is it. But the righteous finds refuge in his death. The righteous finds refuge in his death. The storm of death for the Christian can bring a sense of refuge when we die. We move on from there. He's rejected in Nazareth, the storm of rejection, the storm of death. Setting up the scene, we're about to get to the storm where he's walking on water. And before we get there, we've got the storm of the people, of the crowd, the pressure, whatever you want to call it. John says that they were coming to take him, to force him to be a king. We're talking about an immense amount of pressure here as simply a public figure, but the storm of people. This is where Jesus finds himself. Because the people, they're flocking to Jesus, right? So he withdrew from them. He heard about the death of John, and he withdrew from them in verse 13 to a desolate place. I believe it's the New American Standard that says, I like it, a lonely place. But when the crowds heard of it, they followed him on foot from the towns. People are coming from all over. We've got the crowds coming from all over. We've got the crowds in the synagogue, right? The crowds didn't like him in the synagogue, right? All the way back in chapter 13, you look about verse 54, here he is in the synagogue. Then chapter 14, here we are in 13 and 14, the crowds are coming from the town. He's been away. He's trying to get away from the crowds, and here they are again. And then after that, we're about to feed 5,000 people. But then after that, he goes back away, and the crowds follow him again. This poor guy can't get away from the people. Have you ever been surrounded by people and felt so alone? All these people around you, thousands and thousands of people, and I just want a moment to myself. Maybe you're like our house. Mama, 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 mama. If I hear mama one more time, I'm going to clobber somebody. Just give me a moment. Jesus just needs a moment. He's been rejected at Nazareth. He's been rejected by Philip. Here he is in this moment of a storm, and he's just trying to get alone, and the people just keep coming. Just give me a moment, people. And as if that's not enough, before his time, there's this pressure to make him a king. The time isn't now. Have you ever been in that type of pressure? Maybe it's people. Maybe it's your job, the pressure from your job, or maybe it's some other situation in life, but it's the pressure, the constant gnawing sense that I can't get a moment to myself. I can't catch my breath. Where Jesus is. In this right now, this is where Jesus is. So what do you do? First of all, you be patient. And I know no sane person, right? No sane person prays for patience because God will give it to him. But be patient. Jesus has just heard about the death of John the Baptist, and he's feeding thousands, 5,000 men, not including the women, maybe 7,000, maybe 8,000 people here. Thousands of people. And he's patient with them. This is how patient Jesus is. These people will not, I'm of the opinion, let me give you my opinion. I'm of the opinion that these people were so focused on making Jesus a king that there was that pressure, that they wouldn't leave him. So what happens is Jesus in verse 22, he sends his disciples away. My opinion, he sends his disciples away so that he can send look, my disciples are leaving me. Y'all got to go. Please get out of here. Give me a moment. But verse 22 and verse 23, immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side. While he dismissed the crowds, pay attention to that. His disciples had already left. Now he's taking time in dismissing the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up to the mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, they were there all night. It was getting late when they fed him. Be patient. Be patient with people. When you're in that storm, of the people, of the pressure, of the crowds, whatever it is, be patient. Take time for the people. I think maybe one of the biggest keys is found in verse 13 and again later in verse 23. Be alone. Take time and be alone. When you feel the pressure of your job or your pressure of school or your pressure of friends or whatever else, be alone. If Jesus needs to be alone, don't you think you need to every once in a while? But being alone, I don't think being alone is good in and of itself. You need to be productive while you're alone, which is what Jesus does, is that he is alone with God. So take time away from the crowds, get by yourself, and be with God. Because God is the only one that is truly in control of the situation. Be with God. Think about, go ahead, one more. Think about all the different people. And I know my time's running short, but think about all the different people throughout the Bible who incredible things happened while they were alone. Moses encountered God at the burning bush. Jacob, with just a rock as his witness, encountered the Lord and heaven. Daniel encountered the angel when he was alone with just the lions as his witness. Elijah felt, saw, experienced God all by himself up on the mountain. Jesus, I think about how often King David found himself alone. Psalm 57 is one of those times in David's life when he felt absolutely alone. If you read the superscription that's found here in Psalm 57, to the choir master, according to Do Not Destroy, a Michtam of David, when he fled from Saul in the cave. All alone. And it begins with the storm. He's been anointed king. I've killed Goliath. I have all these people following me. In fact, I am whipping the Philistines right and left. What more do you want? God, remember me. Be merciful to me, verse 1. 2 times, be merciful to me. Be merciful to me. Let me take refuge twice in the shadow of your wings till the storms of destruction pass by. The first 5 verses here, quickly broken up like this. The petition of God, go back and look at this at your own time. Verse 1 and 2, the petition made to God. His patience as he waits for God. He will send from heaven and save me, verse 3. He will put to shame him who tramples on me. God will send out his steadfast love and his faithfulness. He is waiting for God. When you're in the storm, be patient with God. Then, of course, his plight. My soul is in the midst of the lions. I lie down amid fiery beasts, the children of man whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongues are sharp swords. And he ends a desperate cry to God, verses 1 through 4. He ends that, look at it with verse 5. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. There's only in chapter, or in Psalm 57 rather, there's only one phrase that is repeated. It's found in verse 5, and it's also found in verse 11. It's not, God, please destroy my enemies. And it's not, God, please, please save me from the storm. And it's not, how terrible are my foes. It is, be exalted, O God, above all the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. In the midst of the storms, whatever those storms are, if our eyes are fixed on Jesus, if we are so fixated on Jesus in heaven, it doesn't matter what storms happen in life. It doesn't matter which way the winds are blowing. God must be exalted. God is only exalted in how you react in those storms. Maybe you're going through a storm and you need to get right with God. Maybe you're coming out of a storm and you need to get your life right again with God. Won't you do that as we stand and as we sing?